Hey, how you doing, Vato?
Hey, good. How you doing, man?
Hanging in there, hanging in there.
All right. Hey, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I know you're a busy guy, so I
Oh
really
no,
appreciate it.
I'm always good for a good conversation, dude.
Oh man, thank you so much. I had a whole bunch of questions, and I've been thinking about these for probably a couple of years now. Just cause like, okay, so I have to tell you, I think I've been meaning to meet you for a really long time. I had a mentor at the Northwest Playwrights Conference a long time ago. His name was Brian Willis. I think he could tell that I was a Mexican from Wyoming, and
Yeah,
that might be a little bit difficult. And so he said,
yeah.
you should reach out to Jose Casas because he would be able to get you in the right direction. And
Oh
this was
wow.
this was a really long time ago, and I just realized I connected the dots just recently when we started, communicating over email. I'm like, oh man, this is going to be wonderful because I think that I'm not going to have you fix my life choices or anything, but it's just kind of nice, to finally get to
Yeah.
meet you and
Oh
to
no.
get to pick your brain a little bit about stuff. So, where are you at right now?
I'm in my office at the University of Michigan. I'm in my 6th year
Oh,
here
nice.
teaching, and I lead the playwriting program that I actually, or the minor that I created. Because when I got here, we don't have a graduate department,
Uh-huh.
and people when people ask me who my favorite playwright is, or what my favorite play is, I think because of me, they expect it to be like a political kill whitey play, which I do like. Do not get me wrong. Do not get me wrong, but I'm like Death of a Salesman by by Arthur Miller,
Okay. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I even have Willie Loman tattooed on my calf,
Oh,
and
wow. Okay.
yeah, and I teach playwriting at the school that he went to, and when I got here, since we don't have a graduate program, we have a lot of minors, and I'm like, how do you not have a playwriting minor? So
Mm,
I created one, and
yeah.
it's been
Yeah.
really good, and it's growing and growing, and I don't know if I'll be here forever. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I kind of don't want to. I love my job. I love my job. I don't love the cold, and
Mm-hmm.
I would like to get closer to my family and friends, and also be
Oh, yeah.
in a more diverse area, especially when I try to develop my work. There's really no Latino
Oh,
theater out
man.
here, and so it's
Whew.
hard, man.
I hear you there. I mean,
Oh,
I'm
Wyoming,
I'm
I
I'm back in
imagine.
Wyoming, and
Yeah,
I've been here since I was 10 years old. I did have like a couple of stints where we moved to Seattle for a while, my wife and I. But coming home in the last couple of years to start a family, essentially, I want to continue to do this kind of stuff. But it does
yeah,
pose a problem, right? Where I have like 6 plays that are like primarily, like Latino, Latinx, like folks, and you're like, how am I going to make this happen? So it
yeah.
does kind of pose an issue there sometimes. Have you had any kind of luck getting some stuff produced that is that you haven't custom written for that area?
No, not really. Like I said, they did a production of mine 2 years ago, but it was actually, and I'm still working on it. I actually did some final interviews, and then I don't know if you heard about this water crisis with lead pipes in Flint, Michigan.
Yeah, yeah, my
And I did a
goodness.
documentary piece, and we produced it here. So that was multicultural, and I did some final interviews, and one person who I wanted to interview, but our schedules just don't mesh, is
Uh-huh.
Michael Moore, the
Oh
documentarian.
yeah, yeah.
And but he said that anything that I've said on public record, I could use to fashion a
Oh
monologue,
wow. Okay.
And so that one, and then they're producing one of my plays at the end of the season about homeless kids living near Disneyland, but that's also multicultural.
Is that
Oh,
what was it? Somebody's children? Is that
yeah,
what it was?
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, yeah.
So they're doing that at the end of the year. But in terms of like, and we have an issue with diversity, and that's been the biggest issue.
Mm.
And I remember one diversity workshop amongst others, and I almost was crying. I'm like, how do you feel that I can't ever, or I can never envision one of my true Latino plays being done in the place that I work?
Yeah.
How do you feel about that, or do you even give a shit?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's been really like that's been a struggle. So whenever I do kind of develop it, I have to go somewhere else, dude.
Mm.
And
Yeah,
I
yeah.
ain't rich, man. And that takes money.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
so, and then it's, and like I said, we don't have a large Latino
Uh-huh.
community. I actually literally just right before you called, a student in musical theater was
Uh-huh.
like, hey, can I talk to you? And I'm like, oh, we had a really good talk. And he's actually coming in
Oh, great.
after this podcast, because I'm going to give him my book that I did a couple years ago about Latinx TYA. But he's Robert Rodriguez's nephew,
Oh, no
the
way.
filmmaker. And I'm
That's
like, yo,
interesting.
and I was like, yo, man, tell your dad to give me a fucking job, dude. Come on now.
Seriously,
But
come on. Help a
but
man out.
even though he's not one of my students, I've always opened up my office and my space and my time to the kids in our, any kid, but in particular, the kids of color, even if they're not my students, to, whether it's about school or just even personal, I always feel like you can come to me, because unfortunately, a lot of times you feel like you're in the room. And even as a faculty member, a lot of times I feel like I'm the only one in the room as well. So I try to encourage those kids to
Yeah. And I totally get you. I mean, in terms of I kind of want to ask you so much about theater for young audiences and stuff like that, but just academically, because I think I have a lot of mixed feelings because I grew up in that similar environment. I feel that a lot of the time, people of color don't really have mentors in these academic settings. And I remember meeting a lot of my mentors later in life, and it's almost like I've been playing catch up this whole time. So, kind of, coming to what you've been able to create with these anthologies for theater of young audiences for kids of color. I mean, I think that's just like a phenomenal thing. And I do want to ask you about how theater for young audiences can be used to engage kids of color. Like, is that something that you think of often when
all the time
creating these?
All the time. Yeah. And the one thing with the pandemic, we're seeing, one of the good things, I don't know if you know about the initiative, We See You White American Theater. And I was one of the original signees of it, about now during the pandemic, calling theaters and organizations accountable for their diversity. And there's been a lot of switchover, a nice amount in adult theater, but not in TYA theater at all.
Okay.
And they're doing some programming, but eventually that leadership has to change to reflect, it's like, how can we advocate for youth when the leadership, both in academia and in professional theater, looks like Donald Trump's wet dream, man? That don't
There's
work.
something missing here. Yeah.
So that's why my work is geared towards that, not only educating kids of color, but these organizations and these entities. So like with the books, I'm finishing up the second Latino one with my co-editor, Cristina Marin.
Yeah.
And I've already started one for African-American theater.
Right. I saw that.
And with that one, even then I told the publishers, this is the only time I'm doing the African-American one, because I don't know if you notice, I'm not Black. And my co-editor is, but it's just like, we need Black scholars to continue this work. You need to give them these spaces. And then I don't know if in my thing, I'm doing a superhero one. I don't know if I put that down.
Oh no, I didn't see that. No.
This is going to be a blessing and a curse in the same thing, because I love, if you see, I got tons of superheroes. Yeah. I'm not an adult. I'm a grown ass kid. And so I'm for the African-American one, I'm actually writing a piece specifically for the anthology about an Afro-Latino kid struggling with mental health, and unfortunately inspired by one of my nephews.
Oh.
And so, but I love that. And it's a comic book aesthetic. And one of my friends who teaches at a college in LA, she went to a Latinx Comic-Con and she bought a shirt saying the Brown Jaguar. And she showed me a picture, like, you're the Brown Jaguar. I'm like, fuck yeah, I am. And so I'm like, I'm gonna write that eventually. And then I saw, I went and participated in a virtual conference out of DePaul University about superheroes and folklore and myths and origin stories.
Oh, great.
And one of my colleagues who's now at UT Austin did a session. I was just getting fucking hyped. I'm like, yeah. And so I decided I'm going to ask a bunch of writers of color, TYA writers, and we're going to do superhero plays. And so, and then I'm like, okay, I'm going to text or email my publisher. And, they responded within an hour of the email, which I was shocked, because there's been times where I waited a year just to get rejected. I'm like, really? It took you a year to say no? Thank you, y'all.
But that's what we call the undeniable idea, right? Where you just come up with something that is so spot on that they can't deny it. They got to move forward with it. Yeah.
And so, they're like, yeah, we'll do it. Sight unseen. They don't, not knowing who the stories are or the playwrights. And then, and so I collected them. So my goal was 8 playwrights, and the 8 that we know, I know 7 of them. And the 8, they make up 3 Latinx, 1 Asian American. I'm really proud because he's one of my ex-students. African American, 2 indigenous writers, and an Iranian writer.
Oh, that's sick. That's awesome.
So we're like, okay, and I'm like, yo, we're not going to get paid any money because it's not them commissioning. It's just they're commissioning something we're all doing together. But you're getting a play unproduced, unseen, published.
Yeah.
And then it's going to get out to this huge audience. That itself is some sort of like capital.
Absolutely.
You know,
So
yeah.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so, but then I did something really stupid. I'm like, we need more. And so I'm like, decided, I'm going to try to convince like the major theaters in TYA to pay to commission playwrights to develop it and to produce it, and all during the same season. I'm like, no one's going to do this because we're asking them to be a part of it and they got to pay for it. And I'm one of the playwrights, so that's kind of ballsy. I'm like, fuck it, I'm going to try.
Yeah.
And so last week, not only did we reach the goal of 8, we have 9, and I have a feeling by next week we'll have another 3.
Oh,
so
amazing.
that'll be about 12 plays. And the first one that jumped on board immediately was the Kennedy Center.
Oh, that's great to hear.
And so that's a good one to use when you're trying to recruit.
Yeah,
and so
top billing, right?
Yeah. So we're getting in the process and to see how the moving parts work and which playwrights are going to go which theaters. But the goal is for the next 2 years, develop it, ask for granting money, funding money, and then in the 24-25 season, have them produce across the country. And so one of the ones I hope we get, and I just had a meeting with them yesterday, is Honolulu Children's Theater.
Oh,
so literally, if we get that, we'll have theaters from Honolulu all the way to Washington, D.C. participating in it.
How incredible is that?
And, and we also just got a partnership with TYUSA, which is the main organization. So they're going to highlight the play during the 2014 conference, where all the plays are going to be part of a reading festival at the conference. Every single play is going to be heard.
That's
and so
amazing.
Yeah, man, we're trying. But like I said, I cussed at myself, like, don't you have enough shit on your plate, asshole? Really? You decide to do.
No, but I think that this is the right kind of momentum, right? And I got to ask you, is this something that you've always had, like this just complete sense of purpose to do this type of work? Like ever since you were younger, or you were discovering theater?
Oh, I mean, not theater, just that idea. And every time I talk to class where they ask me, I have to tell the story. And it's just, I grew up wanting to be a politician and
really?
lawyer. Yeah, I mean, I wanted to be the first Chicano governor of California. You know what I mean? And we didn't have the arts growing up. Whatever was at the movies or on TV, that was art. And no one in our community was like, you should be an artist as a career. No one, And if you had told me my first day of college I would have graduated with a degree in drama, I would have fucking laughed in your face.
So so how did that happen, going from politician aspirations to playwriting or theater in general?
Well, the thing was, I was getting disenfranchised because I went to a college called UC Santa Barbara, and it's on the beach. Literally, in my 4 years I went to community college for a year, then I transferred. In my 4 years of college, it never took me more than 5 minutes to get from my apartment or my dorm to the water. That's kind of spoiled. But it was also the widest state school, still is. And it also had the lowest minority retention rate, and it still does. And so I went, and everyone wanted to be, a entertainment lawyer or a corporate lawyer. We're so close to LA. Yeah. And like, this is 2 hours north of where I grew up. And it was the farthest north I'd ever been in my life. And I really got disillusioned. I didn't know what I wanted to, was, spending way too much on the beach and not enough time in class, ditching it. And I had to take like English classes for like, you have to do your your requisite like languages, science. And I took like a short story class, and my teacher and like the TA, like, oh, dude, you're really good. I'm like, oh, fuck this. I don't give a shit. And I took a couple others, and even my friends were noticing. And like, dude, I'm like, yo, dudes, whatever. And then I remember taking a biology class of all things. And this is in 88, 89. And this class was AIDS and immunology. So AIDS back then, how it was horrible. Yeah. I mean, I remember being there when one of my friends who passed away found their first lesion, you know what I mean? And, and so I was taking this class, and our professor said we could write our final paper about AIDS, but through any kind of perspective. If you wanted to write one talking about the economic things or the biology, whatever. And I did a one-man play about a guy dying of AIDS. This is his last year of life. To this day, I still don't know why, because I'd never seen a play, and I was taking English classes, not theater courses. So I write this, and then I'm going up and turning in my final, thinking, oh shit, I'm not going to pass. I love the class, but bio is hard for me. And about, I'd say half of the class was still in the room. And as I go turn in my test, my professor starts to bawl, like lose it.
Oh, wow.
I'm looking at my classmates like,
what did I do?
And she's like, why did you write a play? And like, I think it's important to put a human face behind the statistics. And she's like, I hope you don't mind. I made not only made a copy for my daughters, I made a copy for every professor in
Oh
the
my
biology
goodness.
department. And I'm like, okay, whatever. And she's like, Jose, remind me what your major is, like poli-sci, pre-law. And she's like, if you've learned anything in my class, it's that you're in the wrong major. And so the next day I put drama and English in a hat and did a little ceremony with my roommates. I'm like, whichever one I pick out, I'm going to change my major. And I picked out drama and switched majors. And,
Wow.
but even then I was really scared. And like I said, my mentors in college were all white, you know what I mean? And then I met Jose Cruz Gonzalez.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
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 And I've been stuck with, he's like my best friend. We've been stuck with each other ever since.
Beautiful. That's beautiful.
But it took a long time because I wasn't making any money. I was doing art, but I wasn't making any money. And it took probably a good like 15, maybe even 20 years where I finally stopped saying maybe I should go to law school, you know.
Wow.
And so it took me into this field. But at one point I realized that the reasons why I wanted to be a lawyer, I'm exactly doing it, just not in law, but in theater. But the same intentions and inspirations and things I want to accomplish, that's what I'm doing right now.
Absolutely.
It's just theater.
Yeah,
and,
and you're touching on something so important that I have an issue with, or that I do agree with you on, because, you know, being raised in Wyoming, you have folks who don't see the value or the merit of the arts, you know, just as a standalone thing. And I do think that that's a problem sometimes with academia, that it kind of gets isolated and there's no real practical application to this sort of thing. So what a beautiful thing that you had that organically, right? Where you said, we can use art as a vehicle for messaging, for, you know, social improvement or justice and things like that. I mean, I just think that if we don't have that built in, or if we can't see that, how do we mine that out of ourselves? Or do you just have to give a shit? Do you just have to,
you have to give a shit, you know,
care?
and also you also have to be intentional, because like, you know, you have to think about the future, not the present. You know, I remember in the Latino Theater Alliance, oh my God, we'd argue about this all the time about how to get more audiences. I'm like, we do need more audiences, obviously, but, you know, what are the odds of a 40-year-old macho coming into a play and all of a sudden singing, you know, show tunes the rest of his life? That's kind of me, but in college, but that's very rare. We need to build audiences right now as youngsters, so that they learn not only to appreciate Latino theater, but theater in general, and they could change how theater is going to be looking in the future, because artistic directors are like, oh shit, there are a lot more Black, brown, Asian people in the audience. We need to catch up. Then we have to do it with our kids. And sometimes it's hard because we still have to try to legitimize theater for young audiences, because it's still children's theater. And I would like that too. If I hadn't gone to Arizona State for my playwriting, I don't know if I'd be writing for youth, because they have a really big theater for young audience program. Right. And my friends in the program, like, oh, you got to write for kids. Fuck you. I am a real writer. I don't write for kids. And then my thesis was a high school age breakdancing, spoken word, hip hop play. I'm like, oh, this is cool. And then I'm like, okay, I'm done. And then they're like, hey, we'll pay you to write this story. Okay, I need money. All right.
I like money.
And then more and more, I kept writing. The more and more I realized the value and the importance of it. And that when I'm writing for youth, I'm writing for our most important audience. And so that's just taking me further and further along. And not that I don't write for adults, I do, but the majority of my work is geared towards young audiences. Yeah.
And, you know, I love that. But I think that, I wasn't going to ask you, I had following that train of thought about children's theater, do you think that the way that we perceive children's theater is still the same as before? Do you think that there's been some strides in this kind of thinking, that theater for young audiences doesn't really matter as much as the, you know, I think there are strides, but we still have a long way to go, because we have to deal with gatekeepers who don't allow that variety of stories. They all want to do like Cinderella, The Velveteen Rabbit, or titles or adaptations, which drives me fucking nuts. I'm like, I'm working on an adaptation and it's cool. I'm happy with it. It's about a girl scientist, Frankenstein scientist. Oh, yeah. But we had to use a common title. I couldn't do an original one. And so, you know, Africa, Asia, Europe, they're so farther ahead of us in theater for young audiences because they actually treat kids like human beings and not little bodies. And so I don't use the word children's theater because really it's theater for youth that reflects everything from young theater for the very young, like 2-3-year-olds to high school, early college. But we're everyone, whether you're an artistic director, a writer, or an educator, we're still fighting that stigma that is just for kids. So what do you see in other countries that is successful? Like specifically, is there something that you wish you could kind of take from them, or just that basic lesson of like, these are adults in progress,
Yeah,
right?
that's the attitude we have to take. And especially when you're talking about creating art in schools, all it takes is one parent, or all it takes is one audience member who's offended by the material to fuck shit up. And so the gatekeepers are a huge problem. And like I say in TYA, kids aren't fucking it up, it's the adults. Theater for youth, but yeah, it's the adults who are messing it up. And like I said, it's that common respect. And it's less about the art and it's more about access to that type of art that they're doing in Asia and Africa. There's plays for youngers where there's nudity in some place. What I mean? I don't know if I do that personally, but it's this idea like, if kids are experiencing the same thing adults are, then they should have stories that reflect that. And one of the things I've been saying a lot to different classes lately in terms of, there's nothing wrong with the Velveteen Rabbit, you know what I mean? And one of my plays I want to see is You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown. So, and when the little mama spider dies in Charlotte's Web, I get sad, but if all we're doing is producing that safe, generic, every kind of sweet stuff, all we're really doing is feeding kids sugar and empty calories. And look at when you're creating a season, look at it as the food chart. Okay, where is that snack that's sweet? Where is the protein? Where are these different elements? And they're not doing that. They're just giving us the sugar. And like, we're never going to progress if that's how we treat kids. We really need to like it. And then I think high school kids get the short end of the stick because of their age. They're
kind of caught in the middle.
For the festival, I'm hoping, I don't care what theater I work with. I want to work with a theater that wants to do a piece for high school kids, because they do get the short end. But, because it's, we're talking about race, and the character I want to create is a combination of the Black Panther and Miles Morales. And he's struggling with identity in his neighborhood, but also with these issues like police brutality and racism. In the African-American anthology, we have a play about race. It's a musical about race for kindergarten kids. And it's When Good Broccoli Goes Bad, and it's all vegetables. Like, yo, Orange, fuck you. No, don't hang out with broccoli. He's too green, man. But that's about race. But they could do it in that way. But when you get older, you can't do it like that anymore. You have to get a little bit more real. And theaters get scared.
But I ask you, like, why do we have to get like real when we get to adult theater? I think that's kind of like my biggest beef too. Is that why can't we live in a world where playwrights who are creating stuff that, I don't want to say like magical realism, because that's such a generic kind of phrase now, but like, why aren't we using the tools that we have of complete sense of imagination to come up with plays that are just completely mind-boggling, and through, whether you want to call it supernatural or magical realism, whatever, all kinds of absurd things happening, we can make a little bit more light. And I think like theater for young audiences kind of does that, amazingly when it's running on all cylinders, right? Like just.
And it's, like I said, it's respecting kids and understanding that they're more resilient than we give them credit for, and they understand more than we give them credit for. And if you get past that, then this kind of art can progress and can flourish, But that's a tough sell. That's a tough sell.
Oh, absolutely. So when you're writing plays, do you immediately start thinking of, how am I going to sell this? How am I going to pitch this? Or is there a little bit of that you kind of have to maintain as, okay, I'm writing now and I have to create something new for myself?
I mean, I think there's always a little bit of that, just because you want your work to get done. But at the same time, I'll have that in my mind, but ultimately I'm going to write the story I want to write. And if it gets done, it gets done. If it doesn't, it doesn't. I have to want to write stuff, or like I tell my students, I don't want you to write stuff you want to write. I want you to write stuff you believe you need to write. And so that ultimately wins, but there's always like a little piece, and I've been involved in the field enough to know what I can get away with and what I can't. And I think once, so yeah, that's always a little bit. Ultimately, I couldn't live with myself if that was the main focus. Like, okay, I'm going to write this because I know this. I mean, I have to admit there is, I love musicals, and I'm going to take my first stab at a musical, and my composer actually lives in Austin, Texas.
Oh, wow.
And once this year, because she's working on a project and I'm working on a bunch. And so 2022, we're going to begin it. And it's very kind of commercial Broadway. It's like School of Rock, Matilda, that kind. But, like the characters, these kids, even though it's kind of that like broader kind of thing, the kids are really like, the lead girl has to be Latina and she struggles with her identity. you know, and she's with a single mom. The boy deals, you know, there's a boy who deals with body image. He's overweight and deals with body image. And so all the kids in it, they're really struggling real problems. So I could still write this commercial thing, but I'm still sticking to my values as a writer. If I was just being, I just want it to be Broadway and that's it, then I'm just a hack. And that's something I never want to be.
Sure. It has to have a little bit of you.
Look in the mirror. I always have to be able to look in the mirror and say, yeah, I did something that I'm proud of and that does have value and that people can get something out of other than just entertainment. And that it engage. So like, even when kids see this musical, they're going to talk about this kid who, you know, wants to hurt himself because he's fat. You know, they're going to talk about how this Latina girl feels unwanted and the only way she feels wanted or belonging is through her cooking, you know? And so there always has to be, I can't not have something to say in my plays, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Something that comes straight from the source, straight from you and your heart. Do you think that, I was going to ask you this. You mentioned Death of a Salesman, but are there any musicals that really stick with you or that made an impact on you that you really kind of like?
And I've always liked, I thought musicals were always cool, but then when I discovered theater, I'm like, okay, cool, you know, and I was in grad school, Arizona State, and I was home for like a weekend and I went to go see Rent. And I was in the third row and it blew me away. I have the Rent logo tattooed on my chest. When I got it tattooed, I hung out with my friends that way, and it was all my like West Hollywood gay actor friends. And like, dude, now you're officially gayer than us. I'm like, guilty. And I'm like, but you know, and but yeah, Rent definitely is one. Lin-Manuel with Hamilton in the Heights, definitely.
Oh yeah.
And like I said, the kid who I was talking to, and I'm going to continue to talk to, I was telling him when I went to see Rent for the first time, I won the lottery twice, so I was in the front row with Lin-Manuel. But the first time. Oh, wow. I went on a Wednesday matinee because I was going to go to a Mets game afterwards. And they announced that Lin-Manuel wasn't going to be wasn't acting. And I got pissed. What the fuck? And then I'm like, wait, it's a Wednesday matinee. Of course he wouldn't be in it. I'm like, my bad. Oh. And then, you know, and I was still pissed. And then, you know, you hear the opening notes. And then like 5 minutes into it, I felt tears in my eyes. I'm like, it didn't matter. Because I see a bunch of brown people on stage making fools of themselves.
Oh man. And I tell you what, and talk about representation. This is something that I think, at least just from my perspective, we came a long way. I was joking with the last guest that I had. I was like, my you know, images that I had growing up were like Univision, the Three Amigos, maybe Speedy Gonzalez if we're lucky, you know, like maybe if you count Aladdin, he's kind of brown, you know, we kind of empathize with him. But I have an 8-year-old son. Watching Hamilton with him and him being in love with it, you know, and just getting to watch it on Disney Plus, you know, like it wasn't even the theatrical experience. You can tell the weight of the work just kind of comes across the screen, and it makes a difference for kids. Like, I don't know if you saw that Twitter thing of this little Asian girl who was watching Philippa So sing in Hamilton, and then she said she looks like me.
Oh
like
yeah,
you know, she did that whole thing, and it just completely boggles my mind because that shouldn't be the norm, you know, like that should just be proliferated and should be all over. So hell of a show. It's a really awesome show,
you know. And I also love Jersey Boys. I'm not gonna I love absolutely and that's a playwright even more, because I think that's the best book. You know what I mean? In terms of, you know, because a lot of times in musicals, if the music is so good, producers were like, okay, the book isn't exactly as good, but the music is good.
Especially, you know, what I love about those jukebox musicals is that here's the songs, okay? And then you gotta kind of weave a little bit of a story there and make those work. I mean, that's gotta be a hell of a challenge.
And it's most of them suck. And I know, like with like I said, the little homeboy right now, and I want to, after this year's kind of over, I want to reach out to him because I would love to do a jukebox musical of the music from Los Lonely Boys.
Oh yeah, that would be great.
Would that go to Broadway? Ain't gonna go to Broadway, but if it plays in Texas, in New Mexico, in California, in Oakland, you know what I mean? That shit would make some impact. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
And you know, you did something.
But this is the beautiful thing. That's how you get people who don't normally go to the theater, right? I mean, that's the way we got to look at it.
Exactly. And when you said representation, I don't use the term DEI anymore. And I know, like, some people now
what's that again? I'm sorry.
DEI, diversity, equity, inclusivity. That's like the people. And now they're adding access, which I don't agree with, because access is included in those words. But I use the word dire, and it's really appropriate because the situation is dire. It really is. And I use that with everything. I just used it when I turned in my tenure packet to try to get tenure. And I'm like, I'm not using your words. These are the words I'm using. So it's DIRE is supposed to read diversity, inclusivity, representation, and equity, because representation isn't the same as those three. And there's power in seeing someone who looks like you in front of that classroom, on that stage, in the books or plays you read. We don't acknowledge that. So I include that now. I won't even use DEI anymore. Fuck that shit. We need to be representative. And I hate when people like, Jose, how can we change this? Hire motherfuckers. That's the first step.
Yeah.
They don't do it a year later. Jose, I just told you last year, hire motherfuckers. Oh my God. And it's not racists that are fucking things up. It's the white folk who think they're woke. That's really who's fucking shit up right now.
Who kind of 100%. Keep things as they are. And I do have to say, just because I got to give a shout out, and I think this is super important in terms of representation and mentor specifically. One of the greatest experiences I had in college was in like my third year of college at the University of Wyoming. We had one Latina professor who was very, very kind to me. And that time when I'm trying to think here, Jose Cruz Gonzalez came because of her. She made it happen. And he was doing Sunsets and Margaritas at the Denver Center. And the week I spent with him, he was one of the most influential people I've had in my life. And not because he went out of his way to like say, this is what you got to do, this is how you got to fight the system and this or that, but he just said, I'm going to have a rehearsal on Thursday. Would you like to come to Denver with me? And holy shit, that really, I mean, just in terms of seeing somebody who is so far along in their career, taking a chance to say, here's a kid who wants to be a playwright, and he gave me that chance to go and watch him work was really amazing. And like, I just got to give him a shout out because he really did.
He is the nicest person on the face of the earth. And I tell him, dude, you're too nice. This is a dude who every year for my birthday, hi, cabrón. And it's, I'm glad I'm ahead now, because he wakes up like 5 o'clock every morning. He'll call me and he'll be playing his guitar and he'll sing me Las Mañanitas every year. And I actually was with them 2 weeks ago.
Oh, that's awesome.
Because his play opened up at the Goodman in Chicago, so it was opening, and I went to support him. And he, oh my God, this dude never lets you pay. I don't know how many meals, and I'm like, dude, it's your birthday. Maybe that's the only chance. And even when we went to Chicago, he paid for dinner. I'm like, dude, it's your play.
Oh man.
And he's like, and he said, the way you pay me back is that you never let any of your students pick up the check. That's how you pay me back. And when we talk about him taking a chance, like I said, I was a junior and I was going to graduate. I'm like, I'm a drama major. I have no idea what to do. So I wrote to about 40 Latino people in theater that I found out about. And like I said, we didn't have the internet back then. We had to actually write letters and pay money for scripts and shit. And only 3 people responded. One was Jose Chumacero, who was a theater administrator, beautiful soul. He died of AIDS. Really beautiful soul. Gronk, who was this performance artist muralist, funky, wild motherfucker. He was great. And then the third person was Jose Cruz Gonzalez. And so he invited me to talk to him. And then he invited me that summer to be an intern at the Hispanic Playwrights Project, because he was the artistic director of that at the South Coast Rep. And then he went to teach at Cal State LA, and that's where I got my first degree under him. And like I said, if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be doing this. I would have quit. I guarantee I would have quit and done something else. And he's that way with so many people. Yeah. And he has, I think, the kindest soul in the world. I don't know anyone who has one bad thing to say about him. And like I said, and I mean it when I'm like, sometimes you're too fucking nice, Jose. And I'm pretty nice myself, but I'm like, dude, Jose, you're like sugary nice. And people take advantage, I think, sometimes, but he's just a lovely man. And he just cares about people so much. And it's embedded in his work and in his mentorship. So shout out to him as well from me. So yes,
that's right. No, but I just think the power of having somebody to help you along the way is just, and now that's the beautiful thing that you're doing too, is just by being there in that space that doesn't have a lot of that, you're making such a tremendous difference. And for people like me who grew up in a situation where it wasn't too accessible, I mean, I feel that I'm still learning from my culture, and getting to talk to you is like a great pleasure, because we feel like we're just constantly just catching up, constantly trying to figure out what the hell are we supposed to do? Like, how does the code switching work? Like, who am I?
Oh
But,
yeah.
in terms of using theater to explore culture a little bit more, can you tell me a little bit about the ethnographic and documentary theater stuff? Like, how does that
Yeah.
typically work? Like, what's the right way to do that?
It differs for each project, whether you're doing it by yourself or you're collaborating with anyone. And ethnodrama really is blossom into different varieties. It could be a straight like 100% documentary theater where everything's 100% verbatim. So for Flint, it's 100% verbatim, but I very much stylize it,
Mm,
And then there's others where you're doing interviews and you don't use them as plays, but use them as the basis of your work. So
okay.
there's different kind of modalities. Like I said, for Flint, and that's probably Flint, and I love all my plays, but that one particularly, that was, because when you're doing that kind of work, you first have to build trust in that community.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Because with Flint,
Especially, yeah, a community
yeah,
that's been beaten down so much,
and it's still being done, and it's going to be suffering from what happened for generations. And I remember one person tell me, people come in, whether it's famous actors or politicians or never, and they come and then they leave, and we're just guinea pigs for them that they can show off.
just a promo,
they're helping,
right? Promo opportunity.
And and I know plays of people have written about Flint, but have never gone there.
Hmm.
And so when I was starting to figure out, I actually applied for this job 2 years in a row. And the first year people were telling me about it. I'm like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
And then I started doing more research, and then I didn't get the job. And then the next year I applied again, didn't get it again. And then the person who got the job, or they offered, fell through. So I got it.
Mm.
And the one thing that did it for me was hearing about the Latino experiences and that I never heard of, because on TV you only saw poor Black people suffering.
Yeah.
And realizing how many different communities were suffering. And even when we did the play in Flint, how some African Americans, like, we didn't even know this was happening to the Latino people, and we live here with them.
Wow.
And so I made this conscious effort to say, if I get the job, I will do this play. If not, I can't be there for a week and go home to LA or Texas, wherever, and write it and feel like I did something right. I think that morally is unethical.
Uh-huh.
And so I got the job. So I spent a bunch of time just getting to know people and building trust in the community. And then, because when you're doing this kind of writing, you not only are a playwright, you also have to be a journalist, and you also have to honor, the process, and you have to do applied theater where, like, for every one person I interviewed, and I interviewed over 100, 4 to 5 people for every one said no. And sometimes in ways that wasn't very nice. But I respect those. You have to respect those no's just as much, if not more, than the yeses, because sure. I'm not trying to cause more trauma by me being there and telling this story.
Yeah.
And so for that work is about the ethical things that you really have to consider, and building trust in the community, so that when you're in the process, you're not really doing interviews, you're having conversations. And if it doesn't feel like you're conversating with people, then you probably shouldn't be doing it.
So yeah,
sorry.
Oh no, go. I was just gonna say, starting from a place of empathy, like a true playwright or true artist, just got to understand where these people are coming from to be able to reach out and share their story for the good of the community.
And and with Flint, we did it here as our season, but people people here are like, well, when people from Flint couldn't see it, what fucking makes you think they're gonna come see this shit? $35-$40 a ticket, gas, you bring up, and plus universities like this aren't inviting to poor people of color. They ain't gonna come. And so we did do it at a community center. We did do it in our video center, which is amazing. And it's actually on my website. You could see the play if you want on the ad.
Oh, heck yes, I'm gonna have to go watch that. Yeah.
And so I did it so that people who didn't have access, not only to the school, but even in Flint, with the horrible transportation, if they even couldn't see it in Flint, at least hopefully they could see it online. On video, trying to create as much access. And like when we did it in Flint, our students were they almost wanted to quit, because they do Shakespeare and then they have fun, then they go hang out with their friends and they drink beer and eat pizza, which they should during college.
Yeah.
But when you're portraying someone who's in pain, someone who actually might even be in the audience watching you portray them, and then you go home and they have no money, they have poison in their bodies and in the pipes, and it's not as easy to go have pizza and beer. And so they were really scared, but it was a good experience for them. And even the conversations, when they heard it, and, when we did it in Flint, there are people saying, we expected this to be exploitive. We expected this to be bad. And they were shocked. At one character at the end sees the the Negro national anthem, and about 5 or 6 African women, older ones, start singing along with her,
Oh,
like
man.
praise Jesus, hallelujah, and it was just so great in the talkback, and even when we did the intermission, because we catered it with some really good soul food, and so at the intermission, the host, the community center, like, okay, everyone, let's eat. I'm like, whoa, that's cool, but we probably should wait till afterward because it's only 10 minutes. They didn't listen. And that 10-minute intermission turned into an hour intermission. And what was beautiful is that the people eating, and they were talking about the first act of the play.
Yeah.
Oh, and they were talking like, oh, they were literally talking about the play. And we kind of had to like push them back in.
But this is, you're tapping into something so interesting that I hadn't thought about, is like, we have a stuffy, like, kind of idea, right, of what the form is. And why don't we think of playwriting in particular when starting out these ideas is like, why not have a 45-minute intermission to talk about this and figure it out? Why not, have a little bit more call and response, and try to redefine the form a little bit for that to happen. Yeah. But we feel bad, right?
Great.
We feel bad.
It was
like,
great.
And
I remember that the actors come eat with us? No, that we're going to have to actually say no to because they kind of have to be in character. And then the talk back was great, but it was great just having community, you know what I mean? And not that stuffy. I remember I went to a play at the Taper in LA, and that's my dream theater. I want to have one play done there before I die. Mm-hmm. And so we were seeing the play's intermission, and I was wearing shorts and like a basketball. I usually wear sports jerseys and shorts. I'm wearing, even when I teach, dude.
So you gotta be comfortable.
If I was in the business school, that wouldn't happen. I'd be wearing a suit to class to teach every day. And so I was coming out in intermission. This older white dude who's like a subscriber. She's like, son, have you seen how you're dressed? I'm like, yeah. This is theater. You should be ashamed of yourself. I'm like, who are you?
Oh my God.
And he's like, I'm a subscriber. And then I'm like, fuck you, Mr. Subscriber. Like, fuck you and the chariot you came in here with on your wife. I'm a fucking playwright. I'm an actor. I'm a director. I've sacrificed everything for the theater. I've lost relationships for theater. I put myself in immense debt for this theater. So fuck you. You know what I mean?
That's
and then everyone
man.
around us was like clapping. And I'm like, yeah. And his wife was like, oh my God. And no, man, I don't want that type of theater to be. I want the type of theater where like people, like, I have one play where people are bringing in 40s and the Vato locals are killing. I'm like,
see,
I did a,
and that's the play that I would rather go to 100% of the time over something that is just so antiquated and doesn't really have a relationship with the now. What's happening now?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so yeah.
Oh my God.
I don't tolerate fools. Yeah.
So how does that rub off on people who are just starting out? Like not tolerating fools and staying true to what their mission is, to serve through the arts. Like, how does that happen for somebody who's just starting out? If you have any advice or if you got any tips on how to start building that toolkit.
Well, like I said, that's literally the conversation I just had with this kid who just like, hey, I just want to talk to you. And tell him about, like I said, you need to decide what you want the arts to do for you. You need to understand what you want what role to play in your life. And also too, like when I tell people I'm a playwright, I'm like, yeah, it's what I do, but really it's who I am. I could win the lottery and I wish I can. Am I going to stop writing? No, I'm going to write till the fucking day I die because I feel that that's who I am. And doing that also, if you're going in and you're going to be telling stories, advocate for yourself. You have to be your biggest advocate and you can't be afraid. And sometimes that attitude is going to kind of piss people off. It does for me, and so be it, because I do want change and I do want a more inclusive and well-rounded theater. And I said that a lot of the people who get offended are the ones who think they're with the program. With this theater thing, the superheroes, some theaters have said no because like we're working on different initiatives with DI. I'm like, cool, just work on them. Mm-hmm. Others, because it doesn't fit like what they do stylistically, and I get it. And obviously others who's like, yeah, we want to be a part of this, but there's been so many. And I sent an email to the artistic director saying this has also been sad because I've talked to so many artistic directors that make me realize why we're where we're at. Mm-hmm. And why people get so offended that you call them racist, and it's just like, if you're not willing to see the truth in this, I feel bad for you. If you're not willing to see that this dialogue, hopefully leading to action that we need to have is going to be messy, and that's because of history. But if you don't accept that messiness, you're just part of the problem. You're basically reinforcing why we're at where we're at.
Mhm.
And so I tell people, do your art, be creative, be
Mhm.
intelligent, be responsible, be ethical art makers, and advocate. And if people aren't on your trip, they don't, or then they're not going to be.
Mhm.
Work with those collaborators, with those people who are working towards that same goal.
Yeah. Do you think it's possible for somebody who is outside of the academic system to make an impact by creating theater on their own, like producing their own work and just trying to be more community based rather than academically based?
I think there are a lot of people out there. It depends how far wide reaching they want. Like I said, when I got this job, finally, I wasn't sure I was going to get it because I don't have the Broadway things. Most of my work is with people.
Hmm.
And most academic institutions don't value that as much as the guy who has a Tony or
Yeah.
a Grammy,
Hmm.
and so I lucked out in that way and I could be able to do my stuff. And we need more of that, but we also need more of a connection with the bigger theaters and those community-based theaters.
Hmm.
So like if there's work being done at that level, that's great. We want to get it out to those bigger ones to share it.
Hmm.
One of the theaters I'm really proud that is in the playwright cohort is this one called Rising Youth Theater in Phoenix. And I was a resident playwright for a while, and they've done a few of my shows. And they're all site specific, community based, and
Mm.
75% of their leadership is youth.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, and seeing what they do with community based, and it's some of the best art and some of the most heartfelt art is theirs that I've seen. Like I said, the work I've done with them, I did a Latina adaptation of Antigone and a hip hop one, and just seeing, when you see 600 people at midnight in downtown Phoenix seeing a hip hop play,
Mm.
and
Yeah,
in
yeah.
Antigone, the king just walks in. In our version, he comes in a lowrider that's blasting. The church, on top of the church is the DJ. There's
Oh,
a dude
my
doing
word.
graffiti art of the whole play on the wall. This is all happening, when the breakdancing, the two brothers in Antigone, you never see them.
Mm.
Oh, my brothers have died. They need a proper funeral and stuff. In ours, they did a breakdancing to the death, and you had like b-boys on 20-foot walls standing on walls because they wanted to see, because everyone was so like,
Oh, hell
and
yes.
them experiencing,
Yeah.
and how do we get that same mentality into these larger theaters that
Right.
don't have access to people of color and don't give access to communities and don't know how to build relationships? Because it's not good enough to say, oh, this year we're doing a Black play or an Asian play.
Right.
You need to build lifelong community relationships, and until you do, you're never
Yeah.
going to change the dial.
Right, because it's pure isolationism, right? And you have like a bit of the token play coming in here for a certain, piece of the season, rather than creating that constant dialogue of like, what does the community need? But I didn't get a chance to ask you about spoken word or like doing lyrics. Do you do some lyrics for that for the plays, or do you collaborate with people?
So with like I said, with the musical, I'm really scared in a way. I'm excited but scared because I've never written lyrics.
Mm,
Luckily, my composer is badass, so we're gonna work together with the lyrics,
oh,
and
cool.
so that's a good way of being introduced to
Hmm.
that. When I use spoken word, that shit's all me because I used to be heavy into the spoken word scene, and so
Yeah.
when I did my musical or like the spoken word thing in college, we had break dancing battles. I know that culture. And I got into spoken word because I was having trouble writing a good play. It felt like a cheesy after school special. And then I started listening to spoken word and I got into it. And I was like, fuck, I could do this. And then it became like a musical because instead of music, that spoken word became the language. And so
Hmm.
whenever I use spoken word, that shit's all me, man.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
spit those rhymes. Like I said, I'm not a rapper, but if it comes to spoken word,
That's
I can spit some shit up on the mic, man.
that's where you live then. That's kind of
Yeah,
like straight from the heart. Yeah.
and it's hard. Some actors have had trouble with spoken word. It's been funny, and so like the play that we're producing,
Hmm.
like I said, at the end of the season, I really love this play, and it's the first time it's ever getting produced,
Oh.
or a production that I've seen, and and which is sad because I've won a bunch of awards for this play, but it's never really been produced,
Mm.
and so it's these kids who live in motels and are homeless right by Disneyland. These are based on true stories.
Hmm.
And so when each of the kids has their like, I need to go inside myself moments, it's spoken word,
Oh,
you know.
beautiful.
And so one of them is a double one because it's a Latina brother and sister. And it's a set of vignettes. And And so really, I just love how to incorporate spoken word in some of my plays, not all of them, but for example, that one, it's just fun to let spoken word be their truest expression of what they're feeling at the time. And it's a good way to connect kids because a lot of kids know what spoken word is. So that also is a connector to theater, because I don't think the Greeks and Shakespeare, and this is just my opinion, is the best way to introduce kids to theater. I'm sorry. And if you're going to use those, like I said, when I did Antigone, I created a hip hop one to try to create a bridge, you know, and I used some of the original text, but also with like hip hop vernacular, and to write it so it kind of feels like it's the same. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But we have to find those bridges.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's got to be a hell of a challenge too, to feel like where's the connective thread, right, between this Greek text that's thousands of years old, but the message might still be similar though. Like, I don't know, like thematically, do you ever get hung up on that? It's like, what does this shit have to do with now? Or do you see more commonality, you know?
Yeah, and it's just about finding those commonalities. And like I said, writing is hard, man. I forgot this one quote and I shared it with my kids. It's like, I hate writing, but I love having written.
Oh yeah.
And I believe that. And it kind of reminds me, like, I have a lot of tattoos. I'm actually getting one in a couple weeks. Number 21.
We haven't even talked about like tattoos fully, man. There's so much.
And I hate getting tattoos. They fucking hurt, man. I hate tattoos. And leading up to that tattoo, I'm like, oh, why am I don't like this? But then when it's done, I'm like, you know, and like the last one I got was a Virgen de Guadalupe on my calf.
Oh yeah.
And so like, ay, Virgen, you were worth the pain. And so, but it's that same thing. Like sometimes for me, actually, most of the time it's torturous, but in the end, I'm glad I wrote it. You know what I mean? But that process for me, sometimes it's not fun, but I know what the ultimate goal is. And if it works out, then, you know, like I said,
that's awesome. That's beautiful. I want to ask you just a couple more questions because I want to be respectful of your time, and hopefully next time I'll be able to chat with you in the future, when you're putting out your latest books and stuff. And Alvaro really wants us to have a chat together.
Oh, wait. No, we got to get Alvaro in the room.
We'll get him in here. I
need to see him because you know how he's into the luchadora.
And
stuff, the wrestler. I saw this thing. I like every once in a while I'll go to Walmart to the clearance section. And so, you know, those big old like bags that you used to punch as a kid and you fear. There was a wrestler one, so I got one for him. I told him next time I'm in Chicago, I got something for you, dude. So we definitely need to include Alvaro in the trio. So
no, man, he's amazing, and I'm just one of the blessings of this podcast is being able to connect with folks who are really inspiring to me, such as yourself. It's incredible. But like in terms of having a family and managing a theater life or an artistic life, do you think that there's a balance to be had there, or is there constant adjustment? Is that really the life?
Since I'm a almost 53-year-old man who's single, I would say it's hard. It really is. Like I said, I think, as for me, being also an academic, I've had to follow different jobs, you know what I mean? And I never in a million years would have thought I'd be teaching in fucking Michigan, you know? And as much as I want to go home, there's not a job for me right now. So in terms of my family, it's hard to be separated. My friends as well, even though I have friends all across the country, my friends, but also, it's also cost me relationships, because, they don't understand the life, well, why do you have to go to tech? Why are you there so long? Why this, why that? And I think, it really is, at least in the partner part, you have to have a partner who I think is really independent and understands what your profession calls of you, because it does call a lot from you. And that balance, I think, is really, really difficult. And I haven't found it yet. I wish I had, but I haven't. And like I said, I'm still searching for Miss Right. But I understand, like I said, why it's difficult. So you have to find that right personality. And I think when people are considering making this their life, they really have to ask that question.
Right.
Because I think a lot of artists quit during COVID. Like, I can't do this again. And I have a wife, I have a family, and, Jonathan Larson's, Lin-Manuel's directing the film version of Tick, Tick, Boom.
Oh, yeah.
Which I hope he doesn't fuck up. Because, it's a big cast and everything, but the actual musical is only 3 people. And it's basically autobiographical. I mean, you have Jonathan Larson. He died the day he won the lottery. When rent came up, he died.
Yeah.
And so the musical is about him and his woman and his friend, but it's that moment, like, when do we decide if the dream is worth chasing?
Oh
You
yeah.
know, and it is worth chasing. Then the other question is, can I respectfully be in a relationship? Can I be with that family in a way that allows me to balance both? Because it's not fair to say, hey, this is my life, and you guys, you know, you're next. You have to find a way to make them equal, you know. It's like I said, I haven't found that solution yet. So you know, and but everyone I know who is in it, it's usually it's you know, you always have to balance it. You always have to negotiate, just like any relationship. But I think, like, for artists, I think the closest thing you consider it is like someone who's like a neurosurgeon or something like that, who has also a lot of time doing that. So how do you balance that? Because I think it's important too, you know,
Yeah.
but it's tough, man. It's tough. And I don't know how I'm the best person to answer that question, because, like I said, I don't think I found it yet, but it's definitely hard.
But you know, I'm curious because there's a theme. You know, I think that I have so many people that I look up to who are parents who are juggling so many things, and they're still able to do this artistic thing, or their careers, right? Their artistic pursuits. And I felt like I had to stop doing playwriting for like 6, 7 years to raise my kid, and then you know, that's kind of what this is like I'm getting back into it because my child is old enough now that we can kind of pick up where we left off. But mostly out of curiosity, I try to ask everyone because it is a battle, and it is a tough thing. But I appreciate that. Now, to impart a little bit of ground level knowledge for people who say want to use digital media to get the word out, you know, to share their work with communities, like, do you have any advice for people who are just starting out, who want to connect and communicate with people, and share their work online?
Um, like I said, it's my students joke at me because my knowledge of technology is horrible, dude. Every time we have to do something in tech, I make my students do it. I probably still be, and I literally still have my very first typewriter right there. My
Yeah, I was going to comment
brother.
on that.
And I'd probably still be using typewriters if they had ribbon. And I think, you know, and you know, it's different from where we're at, because, like I said, the kid who I'm talking to, and this is the first time I met him, like I said, his uncle is Robert Rodriguez, the director. And it was different. Like I said, I'm your uncle's age, and it was different when we were like, independent film was actually independent film. You know, you know, his uncle went and did experimental testing for medicines so he could afford to do El Mariachi.
Yeah.
Now you see like the Independent Spirit Awards, and it's like $10 million movies with eight list actors. Like, fuck you, this ain't no independent film.
You got to do a shoestring.
Yeah, and it's changed. And so I tell students, like, since I don't know that much about technology, but they do, and to take advantage of it. You know, you could put your plays online if you want. You could do this, do your research to find those different people. That's how I did it. It's just that we use the phone. Now they have the computers. Look out for, like, this kid reached out to me. Research, look at those people who inspire you. Try to talk to them. Try to talk to other people. There's groups out there. There are podcasts. Use the technology it is, because it's opened up the world. And so really use that technology just to connect and to get your work out there. First of all, make the work first.
Yeah.
You know, the worst thing to do is everyone has ideas. Well, what do you have? Oh, well, nothing. You have to come with work, you know, and with dreams and with plans, and what is your intentions, and just share those. Because, like I said, there are Jose Cruz Gonzalez's out there in the world, and find them and then listen to what they have to say. And like I said, use the technology, because I wish this technology was around when I was young, and it wasn't. And I feel like I'm trying to catch up with it and not being very successful. But to take advantage of what's out there, and people who really care about the future, they'll respond. You know, they'll respond. You know, that's, at least I hope so.
Yeah, let's hope so. And one last thing here,
Sure.
I try to make this podcast a case for the arts, especially in places where we don't have it. And I'm curious if you could give me a pitch, right? Like, you've spoken very beautifully about what this means to you as an artist, and you've made it your craft. Why do we need the arts now more than ever in our communities? And what has it done for you personally to better your quality of life?
Cool. In terms of why the arts is important, I mean, I think COVID is a really good example. When we couldn't, when we couldn't go out, we couldn't be with people, we couldn't give hugs. What did people do? They listened to music, they painted, they saw TV, they saw movies, and we reached out to it, and to understand that the arts are just as important as any other thing, and also that arts has a connection to so many things in terms of education. We've seen multiple research that people and kids who understand and participate in the arts do better academically, do better cognitively. And so it's not just, oh, we're just entertaining. There's a value, intrinsic value in us, in our mental health, in our intellectual capacity, if we know the arts. We need the arts because arts is one of those things that also is a way to connect us with each other and teach empathy towards our fellow man. You know what I mean? And those are things that science and other things maybe don't do quite as well. And theater, is a great way of showing our differences, but at the same time uniting us in our universalities. So I think, it is needed. It shouldn't be an afterthought. It should be embedded in our world, and it makes us a better world. You know what I mean? And it's a continuation of the rituals that we already have in place. It's a continuation of the oral storytelling that's always been in place. And so, marriage is a ritual, theater is a ritual as well, and we should embrace it. In terms of me personally, it's just like I said, once I found it, and like I said, as much as difficult as it has been, I don't want to go all Hamilton and say it's my legacy, but, I think I've always wanted to leave this world a little better place than when I got here. And I think I'm doing that through theater, and I'm honoring my mentors. I'm honoring the other people who do this. I'm honoring our ancestors, and like I said, hopefully, the arts in me have left a little spot that will inspire people to continue it, because the change that I want isn't going to happen in my lifetime. It's not. And so it's about planting the seeds now, those marigold seeds for the altar now, so that they flourish one day. And so the arts is everything for me. It's who I am. It's, I don't want to say it saved me, but in a way it kind of did, you know what I mean? And, and it makes me realize that my voice matters, and my art reflects me, because I'm emotional, and sometimes one day I'm high and one day I'm low, and that's how my process is, but so be it, you know what I mean? And I don't want to think of the world without arts, and like I said, as much as it's been difficult, and as many times as I've wanted to quit, I would not change a thing for the world. So.
Oh man, Jose, this has been an incredibly informational and inspiring conversation. I can't thank you enough for taking the time to do this. This is really what I needed to hear, and what a lot of people of color who want to get into the arts need to hear. So I just, again, thank you so much for what you're doing. And indeed, you're leaving such a legacy that, Michigan is really, really lucky to have you. And I can't wait to bug you again, and get Alvaro in here.
More and more conversations. And also, really quickly, when you said about like, how do people reach out? Anyone on this fucking podcast, if you're interested, you could reach out to me as well. I don't care who you are, where you're at. So,
oh, bless you, man. I appreciate it, from the bottom of my heart. Thank you so much for, sharing so much wisdom with us. And, next time I'll ask you, because Alvaro said that I have to ask you what you're listening to, or a really light question, because he said I'm asking really, really heavy questions. So I'll try to balance it out a little bit more when he's back.
Awesome. Sounds great.
So thank you again, Jose, for everything. I know we just scratched the surface, but I hope to talk to you real soon.
Oh, definitely, dude. Definitely.
I'm going to include a lot of your information in the description so folks can check out your website, but your website is brownplaywright.com. Is that right?
Yeah. And there's a really funny story about privilege and how, like, it's kind of stupid, especially with institutions. When I applied to ASU, I applied to Brown University, and my email is brownplaywright@yahoo.com. And so I get a call from Brown University, like, we thank you for submitting an application, but you haven't been accepted yet. So we encourage you not to use our university in your email. I'm like, fuck you. I'm brown. I'm a playwright. It has nothing to do with you. And then I hung
This
up.
isn't about you.
I hung up. But literally just that, and then people wonder why people of color don't want to go into the system.
Yeah.
And shit like that. They
Absolutely.
still, in every institution, including Michigan, and I'm on a couple of job committees, and when I see some of the diversity statements reading by our applicants, and I find it ironic that Michigan is like asking people to do a diversity statement when they don't even have that diversity stuff in check.
Oh man.
There's
so much to unpack, man. I hope that we get to talk again real soon and kind of pick up where we left off. Wonderful human being. I really appreciate you. And hopefully we'll pick up again.
Sounds good, man. I look forward to it, man.
All right, man. So great to meet you. Talk to you later.
Thank you, man. Adios.